So essentially, we all know what analog horror is at this point, but let me give it a quick recap. Analog horror is a genre that utilizes the aesthetics and style of media from the 80s and 90s. Examples include VHS tapes, television broadcasts, and other retro formats like news broadcast stations. Essentially, it uses the nostalgia of that time period in kind of a unique way. Before we looked at the 90s and 80s, it's kind of corny. The only thing I remember from that period is that one LeBron video. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about.
Downtown. Whoa!
Whoa! Yeah! Now I got a full team. Yeah! Yeah!
Liquid slam!
Liquid slam!
Oh!
And I'm pretty sure that was fake anyway. But analog horror flips that perception on its head. Now it portrays those times through a lens of terror and dread. While the true beginning of the genre is debated, the modern era of the genre began around 2018 with the emergence of Local 58, a series about an ordinary news station that starts showing strange messages. I don't know why I said it like that, but you know what I mean. Since then, numerous channels, series, and stories have been created in the genre, including but not limited to The Walton Files, The Mandela Catalog, Gemini Entertainment, and of course, my favorite, Vita Carnes. Vita Carnes isn't necessarily authentic to its formula. It essentially just uses a VHS effect on its videos, like a really cheap one. But I like the story a lot. The story's actually insane. But why is this so scary? These stories keep me up at night. It makes me want to watch it at like 3 a.m. and, shit myself. I don't know why it wants to do that. Why is it making me feel this way? To understand that, we gotta take a brief look back at the history leading up to the genre's rise. The internet was intertwined with horror ever since the beginning. We've all heard of the chain emails and ghost stories that was rampant in the 90s and early 2000s, but there was one phenomenon that became the beginning of modern internet horror as we know it: creepypastas. Essentially, they were just scary stories to tell around the campfire, but instead of a campfire, it was over the internet through forums and even websites. Websites such as creepypasta.com, which emerged around the 2000s. But the thing is, with these creepypastas, there was a catch. With the internet, at least back then, we don't talk about now, at least back then, you never knew who wrote these stories. You never knew if they were real or not. And the anonymity of these stories kept the credibility in the dark. Jeff the Killer, Smile.jpg, Ben Drowned, classics, They definitely sound fake. But that thought in the back of your brain compels you to start thinking, what if it wasn't? It's always that itch in the back of your brain. This effect is kind of similar to the uncanny valley effect, where an image that looks almost human but just off can be extremely unsettling. And this can actually be seen in one of the aforementioned series we talked about, Mandela Catalog. But in this case, with creepypastas, it's the opposite. You almost always knew these stories were fake. But what if these stories weren't just myths, but cautionary tales? For a long time, anonymous creepypastas took over, scaring the internet for almost a decade. But then came the advent of ARGs. ARGs, or alternate reality games, are a type of content that has been on the internet since the 2000s, but blew up during the late 2000s and 2010s. Essentially, it was content you could interact with. The lore, rather than just being right out in the open like a movie, it was scattered, broken, and in pieces, and it was left for the viewer to find. The interactive nature of this genre was an excellent fit for the next evolution in internet horror, as it puts the burden of finding the story into the viewer's own hands. It's associated a lot with the dark and obscure side of the internet. Examples of prevalent ARGs include WorldCorp Enterprises, Dad, and Poppy. This phenomenon even became mainstream, as for example, the Cloverfield movies had their own ARGs going on during the late 2000s at the height of the franchise. But while this phenomenon garnered attention, it still had one problem. It was inaccessible. And not in the way where you can't find the story, but the fact that a lot of people weren't willing to. Only the people who had the dedication and the interest to solve these mysteries went out and tried to solve these ARGs, while the rest of us just watched videos on those ARGs, on YouTube, TikTok, etc. That's the reason they became so popular. The story itself may have been compelling, but the steps and clues that took them to the story became more interesting than the stories themselves. This is why ARGs were so hard to make and take off. If the clues weren't compelling enough and the story was even slightly linear or predictable, people weren't willing to solve them. On the other hand, if the clues were too hard or inaccessible to reach, then the ARGs didn't even take off in the first place. Another problem was that ARGs weren't centralized. You may find that an ARG may start on YouTube, but can take you to Instagram, Reddit, Snapchat, MySpace, Twitter, 4chan, and in the case of the even more obscure and disturbing ones, even the dark and deep web. But while the ARG's concept was inaccessible, the aesthetic and design choices of these ARGs left a lasting impact on the internet horror scene. Now so far, we have been talking about internet horror pre-analog horror, before it came. But analog horror has always existed in some form or another. There are many examples of obscure videos and series that have used the analog horror aesthetic to their style since the 2000s. But the difference between those and the ones we see today is that the current analog horror scene fully embraces the style. Most of these series take place during the 80s and 90s, and some even use events from those eras in the story itself. Essentially, it takes the disadvantages of the medium of that era, static and low resolution, and turns it into a strength. The distortion of the medium heightened the suspense, the ambiguity, and the uncertainty of what might be lurking behind the visual noise. The medium is also used to increase its authenticity and immersion, as it is often associated with family outings, picnics, and even old YouTube videos. It's more tangible and realistic than if you would have used a high-quality camera with polished footage. The grungy quality made it seem like a real person was recording these events, puts you in the position of those people. It's similar to the found footage style in the movie scene, but in this case it's even more horrifying, as the cheaper and the less quality there is, the scarier and more unnerving it is. But all the things we've seen so far, people have already done it. Creepypastas and ARGs have already given this sense of immersion and authenticity before. So why is this particular genre so different? Why is it so much more popular than other genres, and why is it growing so rapidly? The answer to that question is the subversion of familiarity.
Don't be afraid.
All, if not most of these analog horror series subverts normal things. It takes everything from that era, the memories, the setting, and even the fears, and subverts them. For example, let's look back at the most famous example of analog horror, the Mandela Catalog. This series' whole story is based on the fear of stranger danger. The term stranger danger was widely used during the 90s to educate children and parents about the potential risks of interacting with unfamiliar individuals. It aimed to empower children with knowledge and strategies to protect themselves. But in the case of the Mandela Catalog, it wasn't the strangers you had to protect yourself from. It was the people that you were with. Friends, families, husbands, wives, neighbors. Essentially, it made the people around you strangers, creatures, mocking the very people that they are mimicking. In this case, it essentially intensifies and subverts the common fear of stranger danger. Let's look at another excellent example, monument mythos. It reimagines famous landmarks and well-known monuments such as the Eiffel Tower, the Statue of Liberty, and Mount Rushmore as prisons for monstrous creatures, horrifying entities, and beings far beyond our comprehension. Side note, this series is excellent, and the synopsis I gave is definitely an understatement, so you should definitely go watch it for yourself. These landmarks are often considered symbols of safety and familiarity, as they represent the country they reside in. But monument mythos subverts the familiarity and puts it on its head, portraying them as places of confinement. These series play on our sense of nostalgia and familiarity, not just in the sense of the medium they're using, but in the stories themselves, and that's what makes them so compelling. It relies on the fear of the familiar. Rather than just having aliens invade Earth and showing the aliens explicitly, it shows their plans through the lens of a TV station. As I'm recording right now, I don't know if you can hear it. There's a lot of thundering. You may have also heard it during the video, so sorry about that. My audio, what I'm using right now for my microphone is literally my computer, and I need a better microphone. I'll buy one soon, I swear, guys. But analog horror is something that followed for a long time, ever since, before people even coined the term. I've always wanted to make a video on it, but I didn't have a YouTube channel back then. And even if I did, I don't think I would have had the time, but I have the time now. So if you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe for more. I got some more cool shit going on. And coming to the channel, I cannot speak today, goddamn. I got more cool shit going on and coming to the channel pretty soon. So you should stick around if you enjoy this type of contents, and if you just want to see me fuck around. But that's about it for this video. Stay safe out there and take care of your people. And don't worry about the sound in your walls. It's just me.
You won't see me in court, just waiting for my sentence. I don't pray to the Lord. I beg him for forgiveness, man. I done a lot of shit that I really wish I didn't make it in this life a burn, man. It's a hard decision with the Lord is my witness. When I'm almost through with living, please give me a minute so I can get